Welcome to Too Fond of Books. My name is Janelle and this is a reading roundup. In my reading roundup videos, I just like to talk about the books that I've been reading recently. And so for this video, I have 6 books that I want to tell you about. So let's just dive right in. The first one I read was Relative Fortunes by Marlowe, Benn. This is a historical mystery set in New York. Now, what attracted me to this one is the bookish elements. So the main character is Julia Kidd, and she is a young woman about to hit her majority. Her father has died. Her mother is also dead, and so she, all of her money is tied up in her father's will. And so her guardian and the person who has control of all her money is her half-brother. And he lives in New York, she lives in London, and she has just started an independent press, and she wants to put out highly individual, small-run, beautiful books. So she goes over to New York. They have to meet with the lawyers, and when it hits her birthday, she becomes of age, then she will have access to the money from her father's will. But when she arrives, she discovers that her half-brother, what is his name? Philip. Has decided to contest the will and state that all of the money belongs to him and none of it belongs to Julia. And so that's one really interesting part of the story is, like, with the rules that as they were in 1924, how difficult it was for single women to have any control of their lives. And she could not get any access to this money unless her brother approved it, and women really had like very little control of their own lives and very few choices of what they could do for professions. And so while she's there with all the rest of this going on, her friend's sister, Naomi Rankin, dies suddenly of an apparent suicide. And the family seems to be very indifferent. Naomi was a suffragist, and she chose poverty and hardship over a submissive marriage and her husband's control of her money. And her sister, Julia's friend, asks Julia to look into it because she believes that there's more going on, that it wasn't just an accidental death. And so this was pretty good. It had all the elements of a great mystery, but most of the characters were unlikable. And I don't know, in the end it was just okay for me. I think I gave it 3 stars. It was a good mystery. It had good potential. And so I think I would read more from this writer just to see how they, develop as a writer. It definitely had potential. And a really interesting time period for sure. A Shot in the Dark by Lynne Truss. This is the first of her Constable Twitten mysteries. These are set in Brighton in the 50s. And I just need to confess right off the top that I absolutely adore this series. I love it. I love it so much. So I discovered it when I was reading an advanced reader copy of the 3rd book in the series. And so I went out and I got the first 2 because I just love it. I love her style of writing. I love her sense of humor. I love how witty she is. And yeah, like these just ticked all the boxes for me. So it's set in Brighton in the 50s. Constable Twitten is a brand new police constable just out of training college, and it is his very first day on the job. He doesn't even have a locker yet. He is just meeting Inspector Steen, who is in charge at the station. Inspector Steen is great because he fully believes that there is no more crime in Brighton. You know, a few years ago, they had this major case where there ended up being a huge shootout between a couple of different criminal gangs. They all died, and now Inspector Steen believes that that's it. There is no more crime in Brighton. And he would rather spend all of his time working on radio talks about obscure laws and all of that stuff. So he's a great character. Then you have Sergeant Brunswick, who loves the more action elements of being a police officer, and into all of this walks Constable Twitten, who is a brand new police officer. He is a very clever guy, but doesn't realize how other people perceive him. Most everybody else finds him just really annoying. And so I loved the characters. I love the setting of Brighton in the 50s. You know, you get this great juxtaposition between the tourist seaside resort side of Brighton and the criminal underworld side of Brighton. It's so good. So Constable Twitten goes to the theater to see a play with this critic who has arrived in Brighton. Now, the critic wanted to talk to Inspector Steen because 7 years ago, this man, Mr. Crystal, was involved in a bank robbery in London, and he was traumatized by it. He was not injured, nobody was injured, but it was a very traumatic experience for him, and he believes he has further information to give to Inspector Steen. Inspector Steen, however, finds him really annoying. He doesn't want to talk about it, so he gets Constable Twitten to go to the theater where this man is supposed to be reviewing a play that's on stage. And before the play starts, the two of them are discussing this bank robbery. And just as he's about to give Constable Twitten some really important information, he gets shot in the theater right before the play starts. That same night, one of the actors in the play gets killed at his lodging house. And so are they connected at all? And so Inspector Twitten investigates. I loved it. I loved it. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. Honestly, like, you have to like the sense of humor and you have to like her style of writing. And if you do, you'll get on with it very well. Lynne Truss famously wrote Eats, Shoots, Leaves, the book about punctuation. The other thing that I interestingly I found out is that she initially wrote dramas, or like for radio dramas starring Inspector Steen, and then she decided to create mystery books with those characters, and so she brings in as a new character for the books Constable Twitten. But that's interesting. I didn't know about that. You can, I guess they're on BBC Radio. So yeah, I was a big fan of A Shot in the Dark. I read The Forgotten Garden by Kate Morton. This is, I guess you could call it historical fiction. This is from 2008. This is a book with multiple timelines. So you have this little girl who was abandoned on a ship that is heading from England to Australia in 1913. The harbor master finds this little girl, I think she's 3 or 4, all alone on the deck. Everybody else has left the ship. They don't know who she is, who she belongs to. They don't know anything about her. So he takes her home, and he and his wife end up adopting her. All she has is this little suitcase with some clothes and a volume of fairy tales. So she grows up. On her 21st birthday, they tell her the truth of kind of how they found her. So that's one of the timelines, although it actually goes back a little further than that. Then you have modern day with her granddaughter, Cassandra. And so in the modern day, Nell, this little girl Nell, who is now grown up and she was like in her 90s, I think, she has passed away, and Nell finds out that she has inherited a cottage in Cornwall from her grandmother that she didn't know anything about. So the story is about Nell trying to discover the truth of her history. What does this book of fairy tales have to do with it? And then also in the other timeline is Cassandra trying to find out whether or not her grandmother found out the truth of her childhood. So you have the 2005 timeline with Cassandra, you have a 1975 timeline with Nell as she's investigating as an adult, and then you have the timeline from when Nell is born and even before that of Nell's mother. So yeah, it was good, pretty convoluted. It's also very long, but really well written, really interesting story, family secrets, interesting characters. Yeah, this was the first Kate Morton that I read, and yeah, I liked it. And then I read a couple more in the Verity Kent series by Anna Lee Huber. I read Penny for Your Secrets, and then the newest one out is A Pretty Deceit. So this is a series set immediately following the First World War in England. And if this is a series you want to read, then you probably want to fast forward until I'm done talking about these books, because it's impossible to talk about these books without giving some spoilers from the first book. So if this is a series you're interested in and you haven't got, past the first book yet, then fast forward until I'm not holding up either one of these books anymore. Okay, fair warning. So Verity Kent was in the Secret Service in the First World War, and in this book she has a friend who was recently married to the Marquis of Rockham, and their marriage is not going so well. He divorced his wife for her, and at a dinner party, Ada, in what people think is a drunken joke, threatens to shoot her husband, and then later that night he is found shot to death in his study. And so Verity decides that she needs to investigate and help her friend out. There is also the sister of a former colleague who has been killed in what the authorities believe is a burglary, but the sister thinks there's more to it. The victim's war work, censoring letters sent by soldiers from the front, exposed her to sensitive, disturbing material, and so Verity ends up investigating both of those cases. This is a great series. I really like it. I really like the characters. I really like the focus on the struggle for normalcy after the war. And then the newest in the series is this A Pretty Deceit. Verity and her husband go to her aunt's house in Wiltshire. Her aunt lives there with her son who was blinded in the war, and they are considering selling their estate, but it's fallen on hard times. It was requisitioned by the army during the war where there was some damage, but it's also obvious that this aunt's husband had sold some, paintings and stuff to try and raise some money. But there are strange goings on at the manor, missing servants, possible forgeries, and it all kind of culminates in the discovery of a dead body on the grounds. Also in this book is the continuation of an investigation from previous books about another person, a pretty influential person in the security services, and his potential misdeeds. So that's something that is kind of throughout the book as well. So yeah, like I said, I really enjoyed this series, and I hope that there are more. And then finally, I read One of Our Thursdays is Missing by Jasper Fforde. This is from his Thursday Next series. It's the 6th in the series. This is a great series. So it's kind of a genre blend of mystery and fantasy. They are set in England, but it's not an England that we would recognize. It's a fantasy world. It's the 80s, and there's a lot going on. Thursday Next is a literary detective, and she can jump into books. What's great about this book in the series, One of Our Thursdays is Missing, is that it is set primarily in the book world, and the written Thursday is investigating. So you're getting all of this from her perspective, which is so great. I absolutely adore this map of Fiction Island in the beginning. It is well worth a close read because it's pretty funny. So it's all the different genres on Fiction Island in the book world: the dismal world, women's fiction, racy novel, crime, comedy, children's fiction, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, spy. Some islands off the coast here are Vanity, which is self-publishing, fan fiction, school essays. So yeah, I think it's utterly brilliant, and I absolutely adore all of the book-related things in here. There's stuff about genres, there's stuff about specific books. I just think that Jasper Fforde is a genius, and I really, really enjoy this series, and I particularly enjoyed this book in the series. I just thought it was brilliant. So that's what I've been reading recently. Have you read any of these books? I would love to talk about them with you in the comment section down below. And I will see you for another video soon. Bye.